We are going live on YouTube. Good morning, everybody. Rise and shine. So thank you all panelists for being here. We are going to start very soon. Attendees, good morning as well. Thank you for waking up so early. Wow, within minutes, 60 attendees and counting. This is going to be a great start to the day. And my name is Aim from Insight Pact. And today I will be ensuring that we have a smooth as silk experience on Zoom today. So today's webinar is on building back gender equal, challenging stereotypes and gender bias in workplaces, marketing and communications to build a more inclusive society. Got a very esteemed panel of experts with us today, and they will introduce themselves shortly. And as you may know, we are allowing questions, and there will be a Q&A session later. But in the meantime, you are more than welcome, if compelled, to send in your questions via the Q&A feature. And that will be where our moderators will be observing and screening some of the questions that are submitted and surfacing them to the panel for further discussion. So that will be the only place that we will look for questions. So please feel free to put them in the Q&A. So as we're waiting, I hope that we break the 100 attendee mark. That would be a great start to the day. Panelists have been up bright and early. Some of us, myself, up since 3 a.m. Just word sick whether will things go smoothly or not. But you know, everybody is really excited to be here, passionate and committed about speaking on this topic. So stay tuned and feel free to tell other folks to come and join us. Oh, 77, 78, approaching fast. And here we have our welcome screen. This is the right topic. You are at the right place. So in 2 minutes, we will be started. And we will be recording this session. So we will record once I pass the mic. Does anybody have any music or Spotify playlist that they'd like to share with us? Just kidding. Awesome. I'm gonna let a little bit more time for people to kind of make their way in. And there is a riveting, packed agenda. So feel free to check up on the other sessions on the website that you can join right afterwards. On social media as well, if anybody would like to tweet some of the exciting quotes that they've heard, it's hashtag RBHRF2020. And feel free to tag any of our panelists and speakers. So. Exciting times, counting down to the last minute. All right, and I hope we're all ready. I see our moderator, Katja Redbald, that UN Women is already grabbing a drink. And I pass now the floor to her so we can start the webinar.
Thank you very much, and a very warm welcome on behalf of UN Women, UNICEF and ILO, who are co-organizing this very important session on building back gender equal this morning, at least this morning in in Bangkok. I think we have other participants from other parts of the world. Very warm welcome to you as well. And to start with, I really would like to thank the Swedish government and the EU for not only helping us to organize the session and the whole Business and Human Rights Forum, but also to always be supporter in this very important topic, particularly in the current time that we are in. We will have the chance to hear from a very exciting panel this morning. We're going to come to this in a second. We're going to be discussing really the pivotal role of communications to achieve gender equality and the measures, the programs, the approaches that businesses, particularly in Asia Pacific, are choosing. But we will also hear from best practices, from experience from other parts of the world. And I guess if you have attended some of the other sessions of the Business and Human Rights Forum already, we all know there's always going to be a lens on COVID and the current pandemic and the impacts of this into a session. But we really try to also keep the session a bit broader and discuss this topic in a different context. Having said that, I think everyone would agree that 2020 has been and will be an impactful year for the world. As young women, we have envisioned this actually a very different year. We thought we're going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration on Women's Rights. We also had a 10th anniversary coming up of the Women's Empowerment Principles, which we will discuss in a second a little bit more. But also we know, even so we're not celebrating these anniversaries in the same way, we have to really look at these anniversaries and have to look at the issues around gender equality, because what we see right now happening in the world is that some of the issues that have been present before are just magnifying and are just accelerating. And we cannot deny that stereotypes, our own gender biases, harmful norms are one of the reasons why we still do not have a gender equal world or a gender equal Asia Pacific. In the current pandemic, what we see, it's still okay and even more okay that women are doing more unpaid care work. It's okay that women are harassed or sexually abused at home. Obviously, it's not okay. And harmful norms, stereotypes are some of the reasons that are really shaping our current reality in the region. So by this, I really would like to start us off into the session, into this really important conversation. But before we're going to be doing this, I have a couple of practical things I have to announce, and I really would like to learn a little bit more about the audience before I turn to the panel. So very practical. I know we would have loved to have all of you here in the room. The advantage to not have you here in the room is that we're going to have even more participants online, and we want to keep the conversation also really engaging and share with others out there. So please follow our social media tags here. You see ILO's one, UNICEF's one, and UN Women Asia, but also tag definitely the Business and Human Rights Forum. And considering our topic today, we're going to be talking about the Unstereotype Alliance a little bit later. So please use also these hashtags, and we are going to be tweeting from our own accounts. So retweet us and make sure that we keep the conversation going beyond the forum. I think this is all from a very organizational and practical perspective, but I feel before starting a conversation, and we've probably seen this a lot, we start always with the panel, but in my opinion, before we can even start with a good panel, we need to understand who's in the room to make sure that we also cater to the needs that you have, and you'll be involved in the conversations later on. To just kick us off, we would like to know a bit more from you. So there are two simple questions on the screen now, so you need to scroll down also a little bit. So please just answer and let us know from which sector and from which region you are dialing into this forum, into this session. So what sector are you working in? Are you from a business? Are you from a UN organization, governments, academia? And from where are you dialing in from a geographical perspective? We're going to give it a a minute before we close the poll and see to who we are talking. So 70% have already shared their answers. I think we are good to go. Let's see who's in the room. Okay, so quite a diverse audience. We do have quite some business, more than 20% business in here. UN quite represented, but also civil society, NGOs. So I think this is a good base for multi-stakeholder conversation, which this is all about. And from a regional perspective, I think no surprise that Asia is obviously overrepresented. It is the Asia Pacific Forum on Business and Human Rights. So I think we are on a good way to make this a successful session. And what else do we need to get started? It's just getting us in the mood, in the scene of the subject we're going to be discussing today. Just a quick warm-up question. We're going to be talking about gender stereotypes. I have a quick question. When does gender socialization happen? At what age does it actually start that we change or that we create perceptions, stereotypes? %, so that's a more difficult question than from what country you are dialing in, right? So I'll give you a little bit more time. 60%, getting up here. It's early in the morning in some parts of the world, so we give you 10 more seconds and then we're just gonna see how knowledgeable our audience is. Okay. Okay, so this is a quite diverse picture as well. So we have a majority saying it starts really early on. Then we have people sharing it's all of the above and something in between. So the right answer is it happens at all stages in life and really early on, and we will hear from UNICEF a little bit later about particularly the impacts on children around stereotypes and social norms. So I think we have a very knowledgeable audience, we have a very diverse audience, and we have, I think, a good panel that is ready to get started. So by this, I would like to not introduce the panel one by one. We're gonna do this question per question, and we're going to have 2 rounds of questions today. So just for you all to stay engaged, we're going to have a first round of questions with our panel around looking at the current situation in Asia Pacific when it comes to norms, stereotypes, communication. And we will have a second round, which we really look more into the solutions. We will also speak a little bit more about COVID, but we're going to have these 2 rounds today. One thing I would like to share before we start going is that obviously stereotypes are playing, as we've heard, at all parts of life, but we are here at the Business and Human Rights Forum, and I think we needed and wanted to also set the focus today on really the business environment and really have a conversation around what business can do and how others can support business in here. So we're gonna set a focus on 2 areas. If you look at businesses across their value chains, from the way how they source, the way how they structure their workplaces, the way how they market and distribute their products, we're going to focus on 2 big areas. So we're going to focus on workplaces and what impacts communication and gender bias has on particularly women in the workplace. And then we will have another part where we look much more into the role of marketing and communication. So we are happy to also look at other questions and answers and interest from your side, but this will be the focus of our session. And I have the pleasure to start off our panel with my dear colleague Nishta Satyam from UN Women in India. And Nishta has been, or is currently, the deputy director in our India office, but Nishta has been, I think, a very important activist in the Indian context when it comes to gender equality, and has been working a lot with business before, and is still doing in her current capacity. She has been really supporting lots of research and knowledge products and papers in the region to really drive the role of business forward. But by this, I would love to give the word to Nishna to actually kick us off to sketch the scene a little bit more from a macro level. And Nishna, I would love you to talk a little bit about your perspective on business and women's economic participation, and particularly looking at what role do stereotypes and norms play in this context for women. Over to you, to India, and I hope you have a stable internet this time.
Thanks, Katja. Thanks, Vai. It's very nice to be acknowledged as an activist right in the morning, because it energizes you and you're reminded of what you do and who you are. My sincere apologies, I can't have my video on. That's not because I'm not ready. That's only because I don't have a stable internet connection. So it will go patchy, and I've had that problem since yesterday because we've had a huge storm in Delhi that's kind of moved all fibers, and that's what happens in our countries. You have one storm and the internet connection is patchy. So my apologies for that. Katja, kind of diving deep right from the beginning into setting the context. I think we all know that India has a robust business sector. India has a robust civil society, and India has had a robust movement on business rights, on business and human rights. In fact, if you really look at India's relationship between business and human rights, it goes back right to the independence of the country, when Mahatma Gandhi actually took on even indigenous businessmen as a call for helping in nation building. So the contribution of business to nation building, to development in this country has been historical, and we have great examples to give to the rest of the world. Particularly, you must have heard of the Tatas, who are a huge group in the country. You must have heard of others who've done great work. India is also the only country that has a corporate social responsibility mandate that is not voluntary, that actually is a legislation that compulsorily requires companies to spend 2% of their before-tax profits on corporate social responsibility, with about 10 areas accepted as corporate social responsibility, and almost 7 of them directly or indirectly relating to women. So yeah, we have all this wonderful legislation that promotes business and the human rights conversation. But if you actually look at the history of women's participation and women's economic participation in business, that has rather been a poor link. In fact, it's almost, I feel sorry saying this, but if you actually look at the production of exports that actually provided new forms of employment to women in developing countries, the very motivation or the very reason for export competitiveness in that sector has usually hinged on the fact that women's wages were lower. So in essence, we have built a system or a default, a system that is on design competitive only because women are paid lower for the same job. And therefore, these conversations become increasingly important for us. What this has resulted is in a form of stronger occupational segregation, women being segregated into seasonal and temporary jobs with low pay, with unsatisfactory working conditions, while men have secured the few permanent jobs in these sectors. In fact, India is one of those countries that is, over the last decade, has actually lowered its women's participation in the labor force as compared to any other country in the world, despite a higher growth of women, despite a higher representation of women in education, including higher education. Now, while the world is searching for an authoritative answer to why women's participation in the labor force must have declined, the only reason that the World Bank, the government, the UN has consensus on is women are actually choosing now to not do low value jobs, having attained a certain degree of education in their own respective areas. Interestingly, all of the entire conversation on business and human rights, it means guided by attitudes, norms, and behaviors. And I definitely like to quote UN Women Encounters gender equality study here that reflects behaviors and attitudes that continue to be a barrier. And you wouldn't be surprised that the survey suggests that 28% think that a woman should not earn more than her husband, and 29% think that for the same job, men should be paid more than women. So one cannot ignore the fact that the gender inequality that we see in businesses or in the business sector is heavily, deeply rooted in sociocultural practices and norms. And therefore, just legislation on business and human rights would not improve. We would also have to work in a composite manner on behaviors and attitudes. Particularly if I had to point just the gender stereotypes in the workplace, we know that women have had to incur greater penalties for ethical transition because of persistent gender stereotypes that tend to categorize women as having more communal traits than men, such as being more likable, being more sensitive, being more supportive. And even in leadership settings, women are expected to be more communal than their male counterparts. Yesterday, surprisingly, I want to share this little anecdote with you. I was on a Skype, I was on a call with BBC. I was on a webinar with BBC where we were talking about, several people were talking about the economy coming back and ways to do so, and protecting human rights and the role of businesses in human rights. And where we all had different views, and several of us were on the same side of the view of upholding business rights, human rights and the dignity of labor, and some were not. And at the end, there was this colleague of mine who leads a civil society organization, and she had put on record saying, well, I hope I wasn't too aggressive, but I couldn't just agree with the opinion. And I wrote back in light humor saying, I think it is only women who worry about being acceptably aggressive or assertive about their opinions. So you do see that even in workplaces, now that some of it is transferred digitally, there is a great pressure to perform in a certain way, to speak in a certain way, to be more likable, to be more sensitive, and to be acceptably different in our opinions. So
Nishta, I'm gonna remind or use my role as a moderator to calm you down a little bit and save some time for our second answer. But I think what you have mentioned about the inequalities that we still see in the workplaces, particularly what you said, the expectations and the perceptions on women and how they are impeding women to progress and even kind of getting less paid for the jobs or the same jobs. And I think without kind of cutting you off in an impolite way, but I think our next speaker, Ms. Vu Kim Wei from the Crystal Group in Vietnam, has probably a lot to share and make this very tangible, what she has been seeing in her long experience working for the Crystal Group and what they have been doing in their workplaces to really combat some of these stereotypes and perception. And Ms. Wei, I was really impressed by our introduction presentation. And for the ones that don't know the Crystal Group, it's a manufacturing business, and Ms. Wei can share a little bit more, but producing for some of the biggest and largest brands in the world. And we're going to be talking about brands later on even more, but that's where the brands come from. And they have 20 factories in Asia with more than 8,000 employees. 60% of them are women. And the one statement that stayed with me in our introduction were labor relation matters. And Ms. Wei, I would love to give the word and the floor to you and really share a little bit more from your experience. What inequalities or stereotypes and gender bias have you seen in your work experience with Crystal? And give us a little bit of a flavor on what you have been doing, knowing that we're going to have a bit more time afterwards to speak on solutions. Over to you, Ms. Wei, to Vietnam.
Thank you, Katja. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues and friends. It is my honor today to share with you some of our experience in fighting against gender stereotypes in the garment sector in manufacturing factories, and also like some of our efforts to empower women at the workplace. So as Katia mentioned, we are garment manufacturing with over like 80,000 employees. And I believe that you must agree with me that in no other sector that gender stereotypes may be like more visible than in the garment manufacturing. And it is really something that holding back our female people from their work, especially in the developing economies. So it's maybe not a surprise to you when you heard that the garment industry, they may like prefer female worker, or they think that women is not capable enough for management posts, or men should always be the leader. So this is a clear sign of discrimination at work, and people may perceive that is a deep-rooted culture and kind of like a tradition in the garment sector. So at Crystal International, we are quite confident that we could overcome this kind of practice. In our philosophy as well as in our values, we put people first, and that is why we proactively partner with Better Work and other stakeholders in order to fight against gender stereotypes. But things are not like quite easy on the smooth way, because we met the pandemic now. And we understand that during this crisis periods, our people, especially the female one, even more difficult, right? As Katia mentioned, there are more unpaid homework, unpaid childcare when the school closed, and the stress when the income is lower. So the worker, including the female ones, are at more risk, more sensitive, and they also like defenseless when the job security is seriously threatened because of the macro factors. So therefore, we keep in mind that in our new normal practice, that more effort should be put to protect our people, including the vulnerable groups. So I may highlight some point that we try our best to improve the situation. From the recruitment process, we have a clear guidelines and regulation for the HR teams at own country to avoid all kind of gender discrimination and ensure transparency. For example, no question on pregnancy, no question on like a marital status, to make sure that we treat our people based on their qualification. So we also like provide equal development and promotion opportunity for male and female colleagues. Even in the last like 10 years, we could raise our percentage of female management from 37% to 45%. And in some countries, we even could get an equal, like a 50-50 percentage in terms of male and female manager. For the group of workers, it is now like a 70% are female, and we are working proactively to improve this number. So at Crystal, it is important that we treat our people. It's not because of their gender, it's not because of their background or because of seniority. In developing countries like where we are working in, the women or LGBT colleagues have to overcome more difficulties, more social like a bias. For example, they may receive less education, family mindset, and social stigma throughout their career pathway. It's not only in their life, it's also in their career. So we as businesses, we cannot do it. We cannot solve this kind of problem alone, especially when the pandemic hit the manufacturing sector pretty well. And so we need the support, and we are ready to work with international organizations, with the government, with the brands and other stakeholders to encourage our people to get through these difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wei. And I'm pleased that you also brought up the LGBT community, because obviously we are speaking about gender stereotypes, gender biases, but stereotypes are not only impeding women, but also men and other groups as well. So it is not a one-sided conversation here. And I'm also pleased that you brought up the theme of social stigma in the current situation, where we see in the region a lot of vulnerable groups like migrant workers, which are also very much present in the garment industry, are over proportional impacted. And so I think this is a really important conversation, particularly in the context of Asia Pacific. Maybe a very interesting fact to the audience, even before the pandemic, women's economic participation in the region went, or labor force participation went down. It's the only region in the world where this happened. And I think we are really at the point right now in this pandemic. If we don't do something, then there is a big risk that kind of this going to be a deep fall for the region. And I'm glad that we have someone from another region with us as the next speaker to really kind of help us to understand a little bit more on where do these stereotypes and biases come from. So we know that communication and marketing has an important role of creating certain perceptions that translate into norms and stereotypes. And an important industry here is obviously the advertisement industry. And we're gonna have two speakers that are gonna share with us a little bit more about that. And the first one, I'm really pleased that we have Mr. Stefan Lurke from the World Federation of Advertisers. He's the CEO of the organization and is joining us from Brussels. And what we've learned about the World Federation of Advertisers, it's an organization that has been working with more than 120 of the largest brands in the world, but also with a lot of advertisement or associations in the region here in Asia Pacific. I think Stefan, you mentioned more than 60, and happy to correct me, in Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, and Stefan is gonna share a little bit more with us what's kind of the current situation when it comes to marketing and communication, and what have been the trends. And if I mean trends, I don't mean pre-COVID and post-COVID. I really mean what has been sort of the development over the past 10 years. And Stefan, I truly hope that you had a really good coffee brand this morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. Really a big, huge thank you for joining us. But I think you are really an important addition to this panel and to this conversation. Over to you, Stefan, to enlighten us a little bit more about trends and reality in the world and Asia Pacific around our topic. I think you are still on mute. I think you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, that's it's too early in the morning, 5 o'clock. I want to say thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this panel, to sense that energy and that determination to be moving this important issue forward. It's unusual also to be sitting on a conference panel with a majority of women, which is a good thing. Certainly when we speak about this important issue. So to your question, how is the situation looking from a marketing and communications perspective? And my response is it depends who you ask. If you ask people in the market industry, I'm afraid there's actually still a majority all around the world and in Asia who would probably tell you that things are actually pretty all right, that our industry is actually among the more forward-looking industry, an industry which is in sync with society. And if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I might have responded that actually, to be totally honest. My aha moment came, I think I can even pinpoint it, in 2017, when I saw a piece of research by the Gina Davis Institute and J. Walter Thompson. What they did is they looked at 2,000 of the industry's most awarded campaigns. So they looked over a 10-year period at all those shortlisted ad campaigns, which made it so to the shortlist of Cannes Lions, which is the reference for our industry. They use machine learning in order to be quantifying the way men and women were shown. Just a few figures, twice as many male actors compared to female actors, men getting 4 times more screen time, men speaking 7 times more frequently, 1% of women having humor, and etc. etc. Really shocking results. And possibly the most depressing was that over a 10-year period, because that research was run between 2006 and 2016, it was actually flat. You couldn't even say that things were getting better. Okay, that was for me the aha moment where we started realizing that we have a real issue. Now, to your question, how about Asia Pacific? I'm afraid Asia Pacific is actually not that different. I came across a piece of research, and Nudiana is probably going to talk about it, by Unilever, which is quantifying how things look in the consumer goods industry in terms of advertising. And just to quote a few figures, 1% of women are shown in leadership positions or as intelligent. Just 3% of 3% of characters are women of more than 40 years, 2% of men more than 40 years, 0 with disabilities, only 3% of men shown as caring fathers. So it's not only women, it's almost a sort of pretty stereotypical approach to gender. Now, the issue we still have today, and I think it's important that we talk about issues as they are rather than sort of gloss over them, is 83% of global marketers, according to a 2019 research by Kantar, 83% of global marketers think that they avoid stereotypes in their ads. But actually people disagree, consumers disagree. 63% in Asia Pacific of consumers tell us that advertising conforms to gender stereotypes. And so there's a huge gap of perception between what marketers produce and what people perceive. Now, let me talk about the silver lining in all this. Yeah. So the picture is very challenging, but there is actually a silver lining for me, and that is that doing the right thing is actually what people expect from brands, and doing the right thing is what makes campaigns more effective. That is a very powerful engine. So how is WFE looking at the issue in order to be moving it finally in the right direction? One is, we think you cannot only look at campaigns. Campaigns are only the outcome of a long process. Yeah, that's the product. If you only look at the product, in a way, you're dealing with the symptoms. Yeah. So of course you need to be measuring how campaigns look, but you need to be looking at what are the decision-making processes which get you to produce what you see. Yeah. And so that's a very important focus on the teams. No, who's sitting on the marketing teams? Who's making those decisions? Who's sitting on the agency teams? Who are on the creative teams? Who's actually behind the camera? No. Who is producing this ad? Yeah. So there's a very important facet there upstream, which is what's the composition of the teams which lead those creations. And then there is also the need to be quantifying the outcomes. You can talk about these issues for a long, long time and hear all sorts of voices. In the end, there need to be some kind of metrics in terms of seeing whether we're advancing the issue or not. And so what WFE is doing, and I think we'll talk about it later on in the panel, is actually 3 things. One is raise awareness. No, we need to be looking into the mirror as an industry, and we tend to be a bit self-complacent and self-congratulatory, to be totally honest. I can say that being a marketer myself. So it's getting people to look into the mirror and how they're perceived. And honestly, in marketing, there's only one mirror, and that's what people think of you. No, there's nothing else which counts. The second thing is demonstrate that there is a business case to embrace a progressive vision of gender. And that is a very powerful engine when you talk to marketers. It's not only a societal it's not only from a societal perspective is it important to be advancing this. There's a business case. There's hard data which demonstrates that advertising which doesn't embrace gender stereotypes, which is unbiased, is 25% more effective in terms of return on investment. And finally, once you've done that, you need to be helping brands become bolder, embracing these things, and that is a cultural change. And so you need to be giving them guidance, you need to give them inspirational cases. You need to be showcasing that some of the brightest minds in our industry have embraced that and have had success. Okay, and these are essentially the sort of three things we're working on.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Stefan. And I know we're going to be hearing more about the business case and really driving action in the second round of our panel. But I would like to turn to, you have mentioned Unilever before, a company actually that embraces two things that will be able to speak about the whole sort of behind the brand. You called it behind the campaign, but I think there's also a sort of who stands behind the brands in itself. So I'm gonna turn to Adi or Diana, but we are allowed to call her Adi for the purpose of this panel. And I'm really pleased that you are with us. Adi, and Adi just joined Unilever last year after a long career in Accenture, in the government of Indonesia. So she has a very broad multi-stakeholder perspective, which I think is needed to address an issue like the one we are discussing today. But I cannot hold back without speaking about stereotypes. I think one of the industries most impacted in our region is the fintech industry. So everything what is technology, digital, and I think girls are so underrepresented, even at university level, but certainly at the work floor. And I'm pleased that Adi actually has a background and a career in coding and technology. So I'm really pleased that you are with us, coming from such a background. And what I would like Adi to speak about a little bit is two things. So Unilever was one of the first companies that actually signed the Women's Empowerment Principles, and is also a member or a co-founder of the Stereotype Alliance, about which we're going to be talking a little bit later. But I would like, Adi, if you could enlighten us a little bit more about sort of the behind the brands strategy of Unilever. So how is gender equality embedded in the whole business model? Because to Stefan's point, I think it's important that this is not only a lip service or one campaign or one communication. It needs to be embraced in the whole culture and in the company. And we would like to hear from how Unilever is doing this. And then also share, obviously, with us, what is the role of brands in this whole subject. So over to you, Adi, to Indonesia.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Katja. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for including Unilever Indonesia in this sharing session. I really like how Steven had mentioned that the need for the culture behind the company. And this is something that we're very proud of here at Unilever. The Unilever's purpose is very clear, is to make sustainable living commonplace. And this actually translates to all how our programs actually be able to really push this agenda forward. Unilever, of course, is in a very strong position to help empower women as around the world, as over 70% of our consumers are actually women, and they play essential roles in our value chain. Perhaps can we show the slide? Okay, thank you. So, we don't just do advertisement of women empowerment. We actually do say, and we actually do programs on the ground. And this is something that we are very proud of, because it really shows that we are truly committed to pushing this agenda forward, especially in empowering women. Two examples that I have here on the screen is of the brand Sunlight and Dove. With Sunlight, the brand Sunlight is partnering with UN Women to give equal learning opportunities. And together we launched the program called We Learn. This is an online learning platform that aims to empower women to start and to grow their business through skill empowerment. And this is to answer your question, Katja. We are working with Amarta, which is a fintech company. And together with fintech, we are working with these women to improve their financial literacy. Why is this so important? Because I think there is some assumption that all women are actually know, because I think most women in the household are the CFOs as well. But in actuality, they need more financial literacy to run the business. It might not make sense to them that they need to do this because they know they manage their finances in the household. But to run a business, of course, it's a little different. But we see that these women are actually really passionate about learning and being able to increase their skills as well. And then the second example here is our partnership with UNICEF in boosting body confidence and self-esteem. This is to help millions of young people to gain their self-esteem and body confidence through educational modules and self-esteem program. In Indonesia, we're working with the Ministry of Education to embed these modules, hopefully very, very soon in the near future. Could we go to the next screen? Next slide, please. Okay. Now, not just Dove and Sunlight, there are many, many of our brands also that really putting programs on the ground. Here you have a lot of examples. We have Sunsilk, we have Royco, Saraswati, and Lifebuoy and Rexona. Saraswati is our sweet soy ketchup bango brand. They are really working very hard to empower our female farmers on the ground, Katja, something that you and I are passionate about, to really embed, again, literacy skill, financial literacy skill, but also entrepreneurial skills as well, but also the self-esteem. It's very, very it's very, very heartwarming and very humbling experience to see these programs really making a difference to these female women lives as well. That is all I have. I think maybe I'll talk more about our unstereotype communication later in the second session, Katja.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adi, for sharing this. Sorry if I'm a little bit biased, but I have to say this. I really think the work that UNICEF and Dove are doing together is actually a really interesting one. I mean, being a mother of two little girls myself, I'm shocked by the data, and I know Dove has done a lot of research around self-esteem of young girls and what consequences that can have, and the opting out of school activities, opting out of further career opportunities. And I think I'm pleased that Gerda is with us and enlightening us a little bit more about it. And I came across a recent study from Unilever actually, which basically, let me read that out. 70% believe the world would be a better place if today's children would not be exposed to stereotypes, media, and marketing. And I think that's a quite powerful statement, being true or not. Gerda, I know UNICEF is doing a lot around marketing and advertising, and particularly the impact on children. And we have learned the impact on children are determining for the future and future workforce. And important elements around that is not only the action of companies, and I think Ms. Wei said this, we need to do this collectively. So Gerda, would you mind sharing with us a little bit more about UNICEF's work, and particularly on what's the role of governments and policies here? How does the environment currently look in Asia Pacific when it comes to corporate policies and other policies around marketing and advertisement? Over to you, Gerda. Have you lost Gerda, or are you mute still?
Thank you, Katja. Can you hear me? I have unmuted myself. Yeah, wonderful. So thank you, Katja, for this. And good morning to everyone. It is a pleasure to join this panel. So in UNICEF, we work on promoting positive gender roles and gender equality. And that is for girls, boys, and children of diverse genders. So they have equal opportunity and pathways for the dreams and aspirations, and not be limited due to stereotypes or gender norms. And so one of the areas that we see is impacting on children is how they see women and men and how they are portrayed, including in advertising and marketing. And we try and capture and learn what children learn from that and how they internalize these roles. So in my short input today, I would like to highlight both, like other speakers, that there is a business case for promoting positive gender roles in advertising, and that there are benefits for businesses in terms of, we heard it, connecting better with the audience, brand loyalty, and increased revenue. But there is also this social impact that it would bring to the generation of children that are growing up today. So children, they learn from their families, schools, society around them. And as you have also this morning at the start of the session in this poll kind of shared how early in life this sense of gender roles and gender identity gets formed and manifests in children, and how it really intensifies during adolescence. And so this influence is just everywhere. It starts with children's books, with gender toys, what children hear and see around them. And all of that affects their beliefs in their ability and in their choices. So Stefan has pointed that out already. Women are rarely depicted as leaders. And so now we see, for example, girls, they start losing confidence. They believe they're less talented. And that's already often by the age of 6 years old. So without these female role models, many girls restrict their own education, their aspiration, because of these gendered expectations, what their future holds for them. And we've also heard already on how those can avoid non-stereotypical careers in technology, in engineering, in science. And so we lose out on this female talent pool, this female talent pipeline in many important fields. And as Adi has pointed out, when girls look at magazines and messages around women's appearances, they can feel this pressure of achieving unrealistic beauty. And so this collaboration, for example, between UNICEF and Dove is really instrumental to embrace diversity, body shapes, and help with the self-esteem, and is a very crucial element to girls' agency as they're growing up. But as Katja also mentioned, the gender roles and norms also affect the boys. They sometimes really feel restricted in showing that they can be caring, they can be emotional or nurturing, because this is seen as so feminine. Boys may internalize these messages around masculine behaviors, ideals, and so that can drive them to act in quite risky and dominant ways. So how women and men are portrayed in advertising really plays a role in shaping and reinforcing gender norms and roles in children. And so this power of advertising can be harnessed to break and challenge the stereotypes, and thereby ultimately promote gender equality and children's rights. So we already heard a bit of how companies can influence, and that's as manufacturers and suppliers of goods and services, when we spoke about the toys, digital games, books, clothing, education and health services. But also, as Hue highlighted before, as employers, when they establish company policies or structures that are inclusive, that are attracting, retaining, and empowering women and adolescent girls, and set these trends for more gender equal workplaces. And of course, as we're talking today, as the creators of communication and marketing messages, they have an incredible influence and force, and that's print, television, and particularly in our region, digital media. Digital can be more pervasive as we see children spending more and more time online. And we don't yet have all the insights on how it impacts them and how to unpack this. But there is this business case, right, for addressing gender socialization in marketing and in advertising. And it's the consumer engagement with the brands that improves when there's more progressive advertising or reflects social change. And this advertising, this positive advertising, cultivates trust from an early age. And also consumer movements, they want companies to contribute positively and inspire children and adolescents with diverse, with inclusive role models. So we do see positive trends around the world. Speakers have already highlighted some, but we also know there's still a long way to go. So recently, UNICEF has conducted a mapping study in the region on corporate marketing policies with regards to the impact on gender socialization. And what we have learned is that most companies are very early in their journey. There's only a few companies that have already gone beyond individual brand campaigns and embed this positive gender socialization and norms into all their advertising. We've already heard it, and it's another call for raising more awareness around the issues in the industry, and also to maybe have more conversations and consolidate views of what constitutes harmful stereotyping, especially when it comes to this impact on children. The study has also shown us that the conversation around gender stereotyping sometimes can be perceived as a restriction on creativity. And so I think a lot of stakeholders and partners need to come together to kind of resolve and show how creativity, particularly if it's tested against gender bias, can actually positively contribute. We have seen that while some international companies have engaged at headquarter level, it has not yet trickled down across all levels of the company or region. And maybe last but not least, to wrap up, we also don't yet have robust regulatory frameworks related to marketing and gender. So the laws are still a bit vague in our region as well. So with that, back to Katja, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gerda, for this great summary and status kind of report from your learnings as UNICEF. We are a bit behind time. I just gonna say that, and we want to keep also time for Q&As because I've seen there already really interesting ones coming through. We're gonna just move on and get into our second round, and I'd ask you really stay short, 2 minutes maximum, each of the speakers after. But we're going to start this off with a little bit of a firework. We have started speaking about advertisement, communication, and we haven't seen any piece of communication yet. So I hope that technology plays with us. We're going to be talking about solutions and initiatives in the region. And by this, I would love to start off with a video about the Unstereotype Alliance and hope that works.
Running.
My name is Ben, and I'll be playing Useless Dad.
Receptionist.
Mother.
Mother.
Corner shop man.
Can you do it in an Indian accent?
Full shebang. He wants the paper as well, huh? No? Why not?
Mr. Jones's office. Hello.
90. Okay, yeah. Quick wash.
We've got pink sheets.
Hair model.
you be a bit happier? Back a bit. Happier than that? Further.
I'm right by the wall.
Perfect.
Sorry, what do you want me to do? I get called in to do sexy dancer type roles, but actually I trained at the Royal Ballet School and I'm a classically trained ballerina.
Maids, mothers, cleaners, hair, beauty, pretty girl, someone's girlfriend.
3 accountants, a drowning man.
I'm never the hero. I'm always sort of handing the hero a note.
I wish I could get the funny roles because I could do them.
Normally it's about my face, my hair and my body.
I never get to speak. I want to be able to speak.
I'm a fabulous, awesome black woman. I've never played a role like that.
Perfect. I think that really started us off and saved us hopefully also a bit of time for the next 10 minutes before we turn it over to Q&As from the audience. Nishta, we have in the room Unilever, we have the World the World Federation of Advertisers with us. We have UNICEF and UN Women, all members of the Unstereotype Alliance. Nishta, in 2 words, quickly, what does the Unstereotype Alliance do in the world, and what's our call to action for the region here?
Thanks, Katja. In 2 words, the Unstereotype Alliance is a thought and action platform. And the word that I like there is action, because it actually seeks to eradicate harmful gender-based stereotypes in media and advertising across in collaboration with all our stakeholders. Currently, globally, we have about 43 members. And the call to action for the region, in which I think India happens to be a huge participant, is for us to use advertising and media industries as forces for good to drive positive change by eliminating harmful gender stereotypes. I think the point that my colleague had earlier made is also to establish the business case for eliminating harmful gender stereotypes and highlighting statistics like, for example, 7 out of the 10 ads that went viral in India 2 years back were those ads that actually questioned gender stereotypes. So I think there is a business reward for taking that risk, if at all it is a risk, and for promoting and for using the power of advertisement to dismantle. We had the first meeting here in India on the 24th of February, which was anchored by Diageo, and we had Unilever, Ogilvy, we had DBB, we had some of the biggest advertisers in India who came together and agreed that there was indeed an urgent need and opportunity to start the India chapter that will then be the lighthouse of the region, probably, to drive positive change. We are actually also working very closely, not just with advertising and media, but also Bollywood, which is a huge influence in India, and have co-promoted the first movie on domestic violence in India, which also addresses a lot of the other stereotypes in the market, called Thappad, which essentially is a Hindi word that translates to a slap. So, and in fact, the movie got rave reviews, and we've just co-hosted another movie called Listen to Her. It's a short film, again, on domestic violence, particularly relevant to COVID, that again looks at gender stereotypes. So that's what we're doing here, kind of getting everybody across industries into one room and people with the same level of enthusiasm to ensure that the largest force that we have is a force for good.
Thank you so much. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to combine. I see the questions coming in already, and I'm going to stay with you for a second, Nishta. There's a question to you from the audience. How can gender fair language contribute in combating gender stereotypes in the workplace?
Sorry, you'd have to repeat the question. I didn't hear the first part of it. How can
gender fair language contribute in combating gender stereotypes in the workplace?
Absolutely. I think there's a huge role for language to play. Language is really the only way we express ourselves, and it gives us the ability to articulate what we believe in. So even if there are small changes, we are trying to make them in India, something as simple as going from chairman to chairperson, simple things like that, that haven't occurred in a very, very long time to the world. But language really is that construct through which we express ourselves. So it is the conduit, and we definitely need to neutralize that language to ensure that we are able to employ everything that we think of and have been speaking about.
Perfect. Before I move to Unilever, Stefan, I'm gonna turn it to you because we have some questions from the audience for you as well. So, what are the steps in the Advertising Federation does to change gender stereotyping messages we often see on TV ads?
So let me first say that there's a global dimension and there's a local dimension. The global dimension is important in order to be raising awareness about this issue. And as I said earlier, there's still some way to go. But it would be a mistake to think that by convincing global stakeholders only, you're going to be driving change in Indonesia, in Japan, in Thailand, or in Turkey for the matter, or in South Africa. We all know that the way gender stereotypes grow in those countries is a very complex mix of forces, including cultural, religious, socioeconomic, etc. And so it has been our experience that in this sort of strategic effort we're doing, you need on the one hand an on-stereotype alliance which sets the frame, sets the key metrics, but then you need local owners which are able to translate that in relevant terminology and with credible stakeholders in order to be driving change. And just to give you an example of, I mean, you are all on the ground, you work on these issues day in, day out, so who am I to tell you that? But what struck me is to which extent it takes time to translate a global vision into something which is understood, embraced, and driven locally. We were in Japan in 2018 for our Global Marketer Week. For the first time, in a way, we were raising this issue of gender stereotypes with key stakeholders in the Japanese industry. It took them 2 years until a few weeks ago for them to create a Japan chapter of the Unstereotype Alliance with the support of key brands in Japan and government. So it's the local action which is needed in order to drive change. And so the way we then want them to focus is we have a common metrics in order to be measuring the way to which we progress. Otherwise, it's very easy to just make a sort of qualitative assessment of how good you think you are. And there are actually metrics which have been developed by our members, including in the US, by the See Her movement, which are being used by a number of companies across their entire business in the world. And then there's a simplified metrics, which is used by the Unstereotype Alliance, which is equally used. So that is how we want to be progressing, by getting everyone to understand how that relates to them in their unique cultures, but by making sure that they hold themselves accountable according to metrics, which is comparable internationally.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for this answer. And that brings me to a really nice transition to Adi. Adi, there are a couple of questions for you out there. So one of them is, does Unilever have a gender responsive guideline for its marketing and advertising? But before you answer this, I think a really important thing that Stefan highlighted, that's a journey. There's probably different stages at global level. In some countries, we are already more advanced than in others. And I think that's what we also see on the advertisement. And I think it's great that Adi brought us a piece of advertisement from Indonesia to show us without any judgment, and seeing where is advertisement in Indonesia and with Unilever right now. There are no subtitles, so that is not a mistake. It's just watching the piece and the piece of communication and get your own thoughts on it. I hope technology stays with us. here we go.
Nama saya John, usianya 45 tahun. Istri saya Maya. Maya itu bagi saya istimewa sekali. Tiap hari juga dia siapin sarapan pagi buat kita semua. Padahal dia sendiri kan kerja. Udah bertahun-tahun Maya masakin buat saya. Ini waktunya saya masakin buat dia. Saya belum pernah masakin. Yang penting Maya seneng aja. Saya seneng.
Gak tahu juga dapat ide dari mana. Padahal tuh dia nggak bisa masak.
Okay.
Thank you, Katya. Okay, so what you just saw was from the brand Royco, and it's not subtitled, but I'm sure everybody understood what the messaging was all about. It's about unstereotyping the role of a woman behind the kitchen set. And here you see a man, a 45-year-old man, actually now cooking for his 40-year-old wife, who's also she works for the government as well. So this is the type of communication that we were trying to push to our consumers, that it is part of our stereotype communication, is part of our stereotype playbook. Katya, if you could perhaps show this one slide that I have got. So just recently, actually, just last month, we internally launched this unstereotyped communications playbook. And this is this is also answering the question as well, how Unilever is providing a guideline internally for our marketing and advertising team. This is a way of that we stay committed to our goal, and we are stay consistent in our messaging across our 40 brands just in Unilever Indonesia alone. This is something that is we push for, something that we are earnestly believe it's the way to go for all other companies as well, to have a guideline, but also one that is relevant to the issues at hand. And this unstereotyped communications playbook doesn't just address women and women's issues, it also addresses the other groups as well. It's still early in stages of implementing this playbook. We are on the journey. We have brands that are much more advanced in this space, but we have brands that are also working on this journey as well. So we want to get everybody, all our brands together on this effort, and then be able to push this forward to our consumers, particularly here in Indonesia. Katya, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Adi. And as Adi said, there's a lot of other examples of progressive advertisement. And so we are happy to share some of them with the audience post this panel. But let me move on and look also at our audience in the virtual room. We have a couple of more questions. Ms. Wei, one is for you, and it's coming from Anita in Bangalore. Hello, Anita. So Anita is asking, I'm based in Bangalore, and I work closely with women garment workers in the city. A request to you, Ms. Wei, could you share details or formats that we could weave in certain standards to make recruitment gender neutral in favor of women if possible? If you have a short answer to this, but we could also share in the chat, if you have any resources, we could share them with the audience as well. Would you like to answer to this, Ms. Wei?
Yeah, thank you, Katya. Hi, Anita and college. Thanks for the question. It is very practical, but also like what we are proud of. At the Crystal International, we practice like a fair recruitment. So we provide information in terms of like a fair and equal opportunity for all in on the process of our recruitment from advertisement. Yeah, it may like a sound strange to you, but in I think that Anita shared with me that it is often that we see advertisement, then the gender of the candidates has been stated from the advertisement. So it is kind of like the first barrier, the first firewall to the candidates at the beginning, that this job is only for men and this job is only for women, without any like clear reason. So at Crystal International, we are say no to this kind of practice. And secondly, in terms of interviewing or screening, we have no question on a pregnancy situation. We have no question on marital status or the children age or plan to have children or plan to get married. For the case of like a developing country, it is like an idea that when the women they get married, they have children, and they could not provide like a full capacity at work. And so we are trying to avoid this kind of question to make sure that we will recruit the people with their qualification. If you have a look around on the internet about our annual like associate program, we have a trainee management trainee program that we recruit the production future production manager and other position at the managerial level. And we are happy to share that we could get rate of 50-50 men and female candidates and recruited trainee for this annual program. Another tip that we may ask for feedback from our female worker about like whether you think that the recruitment or the promotion mechanism in the company is fair. And maybe last, I may be a bit gender stereotypes in this point, but one of our key like recipe of success that we have a female dominated HR team. So that's why the gender aspect, and then we keep in mind the interest and the consideration to all people. Yeah, that's my sharing. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wei, and I'm really excited to see all the passion in the virtual room here. So there are questions of really sharing resources. So to the panelists, if you have anything you would like to share, we are happy to share this with our audience. I'm going to turn it to Gerda before we are almost ready to wrap up with final statements of everyone. So Gerda, UNICEF has been doing quite a lot of research, which we have heard in the beginning, but I would like to take the opportunity to ask you two things. So one, we haven't talked too much about COVID yet, which I think is a good thing on the one side, but on the other side, the reality is obviously changed. It would be great, Gerda, if you could share if there are any sort of differences, new approaches, resources, things that you could share what UNICEF has been doing to really give more guidance around communications in times of COVID and in the recovery phase. Over to you, and after we have a couple of questions from the audience for you as well.
Thank you, Katja. I hope my connection is a bit better now. So yes, we absolutely believe that well-crafted communication by everyone, partners, businesses during COVID can have great benefits. So the key messages often help to understand, how to protect yourself and how to include important prevention measures such as hand washing for employees, for customers, and for the public. And these messages can highlight helpful behaviors as well as products and services. And given that COVID has really led to this changing realities for all of us, for example, that most of us are speaking in this conference from home and work from home, now there's a chance to portray and to communicate what men, women, boys and girls do quite differently. So the COVID-19 communications can really change traditional narratives right now. For example, by really showing these shared responsibilities in the family, from caregiving to cooking, we've seen that in the video, to domestic chores, doing the laundry, playing and educating the children. So for these key considerations, UNICEF and UN Women have developed and published short guidance note. So you see it on the screen here. And it lays out very clearly in 4 areas on how things can be depicted differently. The first area is work practices. Now, if we show the teleworking and the working from home, we can look and illustrate more diversity in employees. The variety of home workplaces, sometimes they have to be shared in the family, and various household types, for example, multi-generational households. And now is the time and the chance to show women in leadership, and also, as we mentioned before, using technology as much as men. When it comes to education at home, the school closures and limited movement have now increased the need for more educational resources. And there are new platforms, new tools required. And so there's a chance now to show both men and women, not just females, in supervising and supporting children at all ages in homeschooling and using these new tools and platforms. And it's also important when we show boys and girls in the home learning situation that it's not stereotypical. So now we can depict girls working on an engineering or technology task and show boys doing arts or practicing foreign language. The last 2 areas that this guidance gives some key consideration for communication is domestic tasks. I've already spoken about that. It is great now to show how every family member can take on tasks. And there's also another opportunity to promote messages to end violence against women and girls in these communications. Lastly, we see that it's very important to communicate about exercise and personal health when we can't be outdoors and move around. And so boys and girls, women and men can be supported in living healthy, but also avoiding gender stereotypical depicting of sports, like only males lifting weights, and avoid showing females using these stay-home times to lose weight or achieve beauty standards. So you can find many more examples in this guidance. And with that, I'll hand back to Katja. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerda. Maybe one more slide next, speaking about resources, and we were speaking about a holistic approach. So I think it's good, we have these communication guidelines, but for companies like Crystal Group and Unilever shared, most of them have a really holistic approach to gender. And so UN Women has also put just recently, 2 weeks ago, out a very simple assessment and action planning tool for companies' recovery strategies and how to embed a gender lens into that. So please have a look at this resource as well. By this, we are almost to the end of the session, and I'm really gonna just do very quickly, and I'm gonna stay true to this. So one sentence to our really engaged panel this morning. One commitment that you personally or your organization can sign up to here right now to make sure that unstereotyping becomes a movement in the Asia Pacific, and we can drive collectively this important issue forward. And Gerda, so you're so beautiful on the screen, at least on my screen right now, so I'm gonna start with you.
Thank you so much, Katya. And I think it is really this call from all of us, I guess, that we need partnerships and we need businesses to champion gender transformative marketing, advertising, corporate policies, and together with all of us as a collective to lead the way. Thank you.
Adi, over to you. Thank you so much, Gerda.
Well, I think from me personally, and then also from Unilever, having the playbook on stereotype communications is very, very good. And it's definitely is a great start to get consistent messaging out, but that's not enough. You have to have programs on the ground as well to actually really implement the brand's purposes in supporting for women empowerment and gender equality as well. Thanks, Katya.
Thank you, Adi, for your contributions. Ms. Ray.
Hi. We believe that from Christian National, we believe that all the people, no matter what their gender, they deserve safe and decent working environment in all circumstances. And we commit to work to achieve that target. And we hope that this forum is just the beginning, or it's just like a milestone in our way to work together. I'm happy to join this and to be connected to all of you so that we could work further from the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much to you as well. Stefan.
I'd like to commit to two things. One is we believe in the power of collaboration, very much in the spirit of Stereotype Alliance. We can only move this along if together we, two very disparate organizations come together and unite for that. We commit to collaborate, and we commit to do that bottom up at the local level in order to drive change in a relevant cultural environment. And so any organization in the region which is interested in building a program, on Stereotype Alliance chapter at the local level, please get in touch with us and we will connect you with our local associations, whether it's in China, in Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, or elsewhere, in order to be building those chapters, because that is where we will be able to make a real difference for people.
Katya, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. I've just put a contact address here and as well, which will be linked back to the Unstereotype Alliance in the region. So if you contact us, we will, with Stefan's team and also with UNICEF, happily engage you in that movement forward. And by this, Nishta, I would love to pass on to you for your last commitment.
Thank you, Katya. UN Women in India, of course, will remain committed and excited to bring stakeholders together in the country and in the region. We remain committed to the WEPS program that really anchors a lot of our work and to be taking it to the private sector here and to keep the, I think our greatest commitment here is to keep the momentum and keep the enthusiasm. And of course, be available and for any help that we could be of to any of our members across the globe.
Thank you so much, Nishta. And normally I would love to give the last word to the audience, but what I'm going to do instead is putting out a call to action to the audience here. So we have heard from Stefan and multiple others. Please really contact us, the businesses in the room. We are ready to support you and work collaboratively with you on implementing the women's empowerment principles in your business strategies, giving you guidance on joining the Unstereotype Alliance. But a call to action, I think, to all of us as individuals: watch your gender bias on a daily basis yourself. I think no one is free from unconscious bias in our daily life, which is influencing and can really shape harmful norms and stereotypes. So I think from my perspective, this is my personal commitment to really look at this on a daily basis and question myself. And by this, I would really pass on a huge thank you to the panel, but I also would like to pass on a really huge thank you to the people that you actually don't see sitting in the room right now and helping to facilitate and to make this session so smoothly. I think it has been an engaging session. I hope the audience enjoyed that as well. Please stay in touch, stay healthy, and most of all, stay happy wherever you are, and enjoy some of the other sessions that are still on for the Business and Human Rights Forum over the next today and tomorrow. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.